In this video, we're going to look at core animation layers and how to use them to design for iOS 11. So what exactly is a core animation layer? You've actually been using CA layers probably without knowing it. All UI views, whether they're UI labels or UI image views or any other subclass of UI view, they're all backed by a CA layer. You can access this layer with the UIView.layer property. The UI view is in charge of things like touch and auto layout. The CA layer manages the content of the view, and it's the CA layer which is drawn to the screen by the graphics hardware, the GPU. This view is made up of two layers, the yellow background and a vector shape for the logo. Just like you create a hierarchy of views, you can create a hierarchy of layers and build up a UI view. Just like a UI view has a subviews array, every layer has a sublayers array. We're going to create a small tree of layers when we create the first control. One UI view with several CA layers. CA layers have properties for styling plain views, such as rounding corners, adding borders, and adding shadows. We'll dive straight in and see how we can style up our Portfolio app table view cells.
Open up the Starter app and build and run. Each table view cell here has a screen capture of the different controls that we're going to be making. Each one of these table rows links to a view controller with a plain text close button. So let's take a whirlwind tour of the starter code. Main.storyboard simply holds a table view controller. Each table view cell has a subview UI image view called sample image view. The images are screenshots of the completed control, which you can see in the assets file. In samples table view controller.swift, there are 6 samples, one for each control. In table view cell for row at method, this is where you give each cell's image view the image. Each cell is subclassed in samples table view cell, which holds the sample image view. When you select a row in the app, didSelectRow loads the correct view controller from the preview storyboard. Inside this storyboard is a controller for each of the custom controls we'll make. Currently, most of the controllers are empty, except for each has a subclassed UI view. For example, here's the clock with a clock view subclass, and that has basic setup code in it. In the app, the table view itself looks very plain. So we're going to start by styling it, and we'll start by rounding the corners. In main.storyboard, the table view cell content view is the dark grey view. So it's really the image view that we want to round. But image views can be a little problematical. So first I'll show you how easy it is to round a simple UI view's corners. Open up samples table view controller.swift and find cell for row at method. And we'll type in the corner radius for the cell. And build and run. The cell's corners are now rounded. And rounding the corner of most views is as easy as that.
The reason why the property is called corner radius is because that's how the curvature is measured. You can see that the red circle has the same curvature as the outline. The radius of that circle gives the curvature. If you want a perfectly round control, then use corner radius as half the width of the control.
We'll remove the cells rounding and do the image view styling in the cells subclass. So open up samples table view cell And we're going to change the corner radius property on the image views layer. We have to make sure that the view's bounds have been set by auto layout before making changes to the view's layer. So you generally do layer adjustments in the view's layout subviews. Make sure you call super, otherwise the layout won't take place. This method happens after all the layout's been done, so you can use things like the view's bounds when you're calculating corner radius, etc. I'll set up a convenience line to access the sample image view layer. And let's round the image view's corners just as we did the cell. And build and run. And nothing seems to have happened. This is because the image is spilling out of the view's edges. So we just have to mask the layer with masks to bounds. And build and run. And now we have an image view with rounded corners. I'll now put a thin grey border around the edge of the image view. So back to our layout subviews in the cell. UI Color here is part of UIKit. Because Core Animation is an older API, it doesn't use UIKit, which is relatively new. Core Animation uses a CG, or Core Graphics Color, and this CG color is a property on UI Color, which gives the Core Graphics color reference. We'll give it a width of 2 points using border width. Notice I said points and not pixels. Nowadays we always work in points, and iOS takes care of the scaling for the different Retina options. And build and run. And that's looking pretty good. We can make each cell pop a little bit by having a tiny drop shadow. We won't go overboard with drop shadows, just a hint of one will do. To get a shadow, you set the layer's shadow offset, shadow opacity, and the shadow radius. This will offset the shadow by 4 pixels to the right and 4 pixels downwards. Make sure you put in shadow opacity here, not just opacity. There's also a layer opacity property to make the layer more transparent, which I accidentally use sometimes and then wonder why my view looks so faded. Here we've made the shadow slightly opaque and we've blurred the shadow over 5 points. And build and run. And we have a problem. The shadow's not showing. Because of the image spilling out over the edge and not rounding the corners, we had to set the layer's masks to bound as true. So it now clips off any shadow which appears outside of the image view. The answer is to set up a layer hierarchy. We'll have the main layer providing a shadow and a sublayer providing the image. It's the sublayer that will mask to bounds for the rounded corners. The main layer underneath will show the shadow. Create a new layer property and a property to hold the image, because we're going to be holding the image in a layer instead of in the image view's image property. In the table view controller, we'll send the image to this property instead of to sample image view. Back in the cell, we only want to add the new layer once, so we'll add it when the cell is first created. And in layout subviews, I'll give the new image layer the same size as the other layer. And load the contents of the layer. That's going to be the image. Again, we can't use UI image because that's part of UIKit, and Core Animation layers don't know about UIKit. So we use UI image's CG image property, which converts the UI image to a Core Graphics image. We set the masks to bounds and the corner radius. and remove masks to bounds on the sample image view layer. The default is false. I'll take out the border as it looks best with just the shadow. And build and run. And now we have a hierarchy of views and layers. We have the cell's contents view, that's the grey. Then we have the sample image view with 2 layers. The main layers holding the shadow and the sub-layers holding the image. There's one last thing we can do to make this a little bit unique, and that's to round off only 2 of the corners. You can specify with an array which corners to mask out. The min x and min y is the top left, and the max x and the max y corner is the bottom right corner. Build and run. And we have a nicely stylized image view in a table view cell.